Ethiopia expels 7 senior United Nations officials for allegedly meddling in its internal affairs. President Biden's security advisor holds talks with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And Tunisians welcome the appointment of the country's first woman prime minister. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business, it's Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Zambia's annual consumer price inflation slows down to an 8-month low in September as food prices retreat from record highs. And Africa's largest airline, Ethiopian Airlines, is set to bounce back to pre-pandemic traffic levels in 2023, a year ahead of its rivals on the continent. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thanks for that, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. Let's begin this news hour in Ethiopia, where the government has expelled 7 senior UN officials. It accuses them of meddling in the country's internal affairs. The officials have 72 hours to leave the country. This comes a day after UN humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths said that he assumed that famine had taken hold in the northern Tigray region. He also alleged what he termed a de facto blockade restricting the delivery of aid. Ethiopia's UN mission in New York says the claims of a blockade are baseless. Earlier this week, UN Secretary General spokesperson Stephen Dujarric spoke about the challenges the organization was facing delivering aid.
Trucks carrying fuel and medical supplies still cannot enter Tigray. Trucks are waiting in Samara, in Afar, to travel to Mekele. Mr. Griffiths said he continues to engage with the government of Ethiopia to advocate for the easing of these blockade-like conditions and to allow for sustained and regular access to aid convoys. Commercial supplies have also been blocked since the end of June, causing severe shortages of essential commodities and a sharp rise in prices.
Well, for more on this, let's cross to Giram Chalo, who is live for us in Addis Ababa. Thank you so much for joining us. Giram, 7 UN officials expelled from Ethiopia. Tell us more about this.
So the diplomatic term is called the Declaration of Persona non grata, which you, by translation, say that diplomats or anyone the country finds not following the country's rule or meddling in the middle of the internal affairs of the country to leave the nation in 72 hours. And that's what has been declared against 7 officials of the UN and other aid organizations. And among them are Adel Kodir, by the way, UNICEF Ethiopia representative. We also have Mr. Saeed Mohammed Hassi, Deputy Head of Office for Coordination in Humanitarian Affairs in Ethiopia. We have Mr. Grant Lay, Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator, Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs here in Ethiopia, among us the 7 people who, according to the government of Ethiopia, have been meddling in the internal affairs of the country and should leave the country in the next 72 hours. The Ethiopian Foreign Affairs Ministry is also saying that we've been time and again complaining against these individuals for the United Nations to stop meddling into issues, political or peace and security issues of Ethiopia. But at the end of the day, we are not successful, so we have to declare this persona non grata and for these individuals to leave the nation. So they are expected to leave the nation in the next 72 hours, Hannah.
Well, Giram, we also remember that back on Tuesday, just a couple of days ago, the UN humanitarian chief, Martin Griffiths, had said that a de facto blockade was preventing aid from entering the Tigray region. What is the situation on the ground?
So, Hannah, first of all, the humanitarian situation in the northern part of Ethiopia, not only in Tigray, but also in Afar and in Amhara regional state, remains to be dire. For instance, in the places where the border towns between the Amhara regional state and Tigray, Afar and Tigray at the same time, they are facing one of the most disastrous situations when it comes to delivery of food. But then again, the government time and again is insisting that it is trying to do its level best by delivering basic necessities for these people, including food, water, and sometimes shelter too, so that lives can be saved and a catastrophe can be avoided. But what you said about the UN officials' complaint has also been addressed by the Office of the Prime Minister a few weeks back, and also officials from the Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been also talking about it. They are saying that, look, aid delivery is being coordinated between the Ethiopian government and the UN agencies, and that has been prevented because of lack of trucks which are entering the Tigray regional state, which are also not returning after delivering aid to that regional state. That has created a major hiccup in the delivery of food, by the way, Hannah, because these trucks, there are shortage of these trucks, although there is food perhaps in warehouses in different locations in Ethiopia. So we have to understand that the situation in the northern part of Ethiopia remains to be dire. Food delivery must be made, but then again, these kinds of shortage of trucks, for instance, kinds of hiccups, and the insecurity, the continued fighting is also preventing this delivery not to be made. So in the next few days, something needs to be changed, and the UN and the Ethiopian government are working together to prevent any catastrophe.
Thank you so much for all that. Giram Chala speaking to us from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. We'll turn our attention to Nigeria, where in yet another attack, about 30 people have been killed by criminals in the state of Niger. Officials in the border state of Kaduna have become the latest to propose drastic measures to tackle criminal gangs. They want to shut down telecommunications services in some parts of the state to stop the gangs from coordinating these brutal attacks. Tesema Kende reports.
A wave of criminal violence continues to affect parts of Nigeria, with an ever-increasing death toll reported. In the latest attacks, unknown gunmen invaded villages in the Munya area of Niger State and killed around 30 people. One state government official confirmed the attacks, but was unable to say how many people died or were injured. At least 84 people were killed in similar attacks in Nigeria in a 2-week period a few months ago. In Kaduna State, at least 45 people were killed last weekend alone. The northwestern state has now requested a shutdown of telecommunication services in some areas as the battle against criminal gangs intensifies. Authorities say that will disrupt communication within organized gangs as security agencies attempt to track down those responsible for killing people and destroying property. Kaduna's request for a shutdown of telecommunication services makes it the 4th state to have such services disconnected for the same reason. Others include Zamfara, Katsina and Sokoto, where there have been similar levels of violence. Nationwide, there have been several organized raids targeting suspected criminal hideouts in the past few weeks. Monday, Kurias, the Commissioner of Police in Niger State, says investigations have started to track down the perpetrators of these latest criminal acts and make them face justice. Tesem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Well, in a meeting between U.S. State Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Egyptian President Abdel el-Sisi, they discussed a raft of issues. During a meeting in Cairo, they touched on local and regional matters, including the Grand Renaissance Dam, human rights, the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, and regional political concerns. Those concerns included a return to constitutional rule in Tunisia, the need for a civilian-led government in Sudan, as well as a plan to support elections in Libya. Adil Marouchi reports.
After stops in Saudi Arabia and the UAE that are part of ongoing efforts to end the war in Yemen, Jake Sullivan arrived to Cairo to discuss ways to resolve some African conflicts. President Joe Biden's national security advisor met Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, as well as the country's foreign minister and the head of the General Intelligence Bureau.
Ties between the United States and Egypt have been strengthening in recent years. They were very strong during President Trump's time in office, and even with Joe Biden, so far the ties are good. Biden has wide experience in regional affairs, and he realizes the role Egypt can play as an Arab and regional leader. Egypt is a gateway and a key player in the search for many solutions to regional issues, top of which are Libya and Palestine.
President Sisi and Sullivan agreed to coordinate to help Libya prepare for elections. Both countries insist that Libya must hold both presidential and parliamentary elections on the UN scheduled date of December 24. They also talked about unifying Libya's military and evacuating foreign fighters and mercenaries.
Libya has a great impact over the region. Egypt's role has reversed. It is now working to make the political track a success, and it's encouraging all Libyan factions to be on board that negotiation track. The United States shares the same vision as Egypt. They want the democratic process to move forward, but they both understand that can't happen unless foreign fighters leave.
Cairo updated the visiting U.S. official about the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam talks and said that it hopes to resolve the matter as soon as possible. Egypt has also stressed the importance of resolving the Palestinian crisis, which the presidency office says will greatly and positively reflect upon the entire region. It's why Egypt wanted to get the White House support for its initiative to reconstruct Gaza. The variety of topics discussed reflects the keenness of both countries to bolster strategic ties. All countries that share borders with Egypt are suffering from either war or political instability. President el-Sisi is amassing international support to put an end to these conflicts one at a time. Aida al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In Sudan, it was a day of protest with thousands of demonstrators out in the streets demanding changes. Opposition groups in the country had urged people to protest in an attempt to pressure the government to reform the country's security forces. The opposition also wants a faster handover of power to a civilian government. Naba Mohideen reports from Khartoum.
Thousands of people rallied in the streets of Khartoum and other Sudanese states. Some protesters joined Khartoum's march, coming from the northern state.
A civilian role must be sustained. We had experienced enough of the military role since 1956 and the followed years. We announce it from the rail authority. It's the time for the civilian role from now on.
This is a historical day in Sudan. We won't compromise the civilian role. We are looking for fresh and real elections.
Sudan is currently led by a transitional government after a mass uprising ended the autocratic rule of President Omar al-Bashir 2 years ago.
More than 85 pro-democracy groups and committees called for this march. They are all demanding the military generals hand over power to the civilians.
According to the transitional pact, the military general's period in office should have ended in May, when power was to be transferred to the civilian leaders. The protest call comes 2 weeks after authorities foiled the coup. The attempt has worsened relations between the military and civilian wings of the current transitional government. The demonstrators hope the day of protest will help pressure the transitional government to hand over power. Naba Mohideen, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Tunisia says the move by France to reduce the number of visas available to nationals of Algeria, Morocco and Tunisia punishes migrants and will encourage irregular migration. On Tuesday, France announced that it would halve the number of visas available to Moroccans and Algerians and reduce by a third those available to Tunisians. It accused the 3 North African countries of failing to cooperate over the return of illegal migrants sent home by Paris. Reporting from Tunisia's capital, here's Adnan Chouachi.
The Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights has denounced France's decision. Activists have urged President Kais Saied to respond to the move by France as soon as possible. They say Paris does not respect its commitments concerning the bilateral migration agreements.
France has always claimed its support for Tunisia, but this decision proves the contrary. France is putting pressure on Tunisia to take back more than 3,000 nationals who live on French soil. France only wants Maghreb countries to respect bilateral agreements and extradite migrants. In 2008, Tunis and Paris agreed to grant 9,000 visas annually to qualified job seekers, including 2,500 seasonal jobs. This has never happened.
According to Lawyers Without Borders, France has reduced by 50% the number of visas granted to Tunisians since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the brain drain of skilled migrants to France continues. This is largely seen as a loss for Tunisia.
France does not welcome ordinary workers and immigrants, but the door is wide open only for Tunisian doctors and engineers. It encourages brain drain and imposes its own vision of immigrants, which does not serve Tunisia's sovereign interests.
Many Tunisians say that in the absence of legal and regular means of migration, more people will seek ways to illegally and irregularly migrate to Europe.
I'm a teacher and I can't get a visa even for tourism. France punishes Tunisia and Maghreb countries and encourages youth to look for irregular migration instead of getting a visa.
Cutting visas serves the interests of smugglers and traffickers who will provide more makeshift boats to reach European shores by sea. More people will die during this risky journey. France is turning a blind eye to this human tragedy.
Analysts say that immigration is becoming a key campaign issue ahead of the French presidential election set for April 2022. According to the Tunisian Migration Observatory, the French government's decision to reduce by 50% the number of visas available to Algerians and Moroccans and reduce those for Tunisians by almost a third could trigger a new wave of irregular migration in the Mediterranean basin. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
On to the United Arab Emirates now, where the Dubai Expo 2020 has kicked off. The exhibition began with a colorful opening ceremony with 30,000 people in attendance. Global stars are also curtain-raising the event, including Berenice Angelique Kidjo. The world-famous Expo is also streaming live in over 430 locations in the UAE and the world. The event was cancelled last year due to coronavirus. This time, it's set to run between October 1st and March the 30th, 2022. Let's now take a short break and return. More in Africa Live, including an investigation reveals that senior officials benefited from a COVID-19 related contract in South Africa. And more Kenyan health workers leaving the country for better jobs elsewhere.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden Shawishi, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa's real friends are those bridging the infrastructure deficit. China is doing exactly that through the Belt and Road Initiative. Roads, rail, sea and airports are opening up Africa. A clarion call to friends of Africa. Hard infrastructure is what we need to get out of poverty. BRI African Voices.
We love the trade. We love China.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, groups representing women as well as national labor unions in Tunisia have welcomed President Kais Saied's decision to name Najla Boudin Ramdan, a university engineer, the country's first woman prime minister. They say the move is a positive step in the right direction, but they also want the new premier to urgently address the country's challenges.
The head of state said that Najla Boudin and her cabinet will be responsible for solving the country's urgent problems, which led to unrest across Tunisia before the July 25th presidential move to freeze parliament and lift MPs' immunity.
Tunisia is going through exceptional measures after years of crises, especially the recent political, economic and social, amongst other problems. I decided to designate you to form a new government. This has happened for the first time in Tunisia's history. It's the first time that a woman heads the government.
The Association of Tunisian Judges and the Tunisian Association of Democratic Women have welcomed the appointment of Najla Boudin. However, activists say the new prime minister needs to prove her commitment to spearhead change by respecting human rights and the democratic process in the country.
The designation of the first female prime minister is a step forward and a positive indicator
However, it's not a guarantee of success because we are yet to evaluate her political performance and state management capacities, especially in the economy, society, and the judicial system.
The designation of the first woman Prime Minister is a step forward and a positive indicator. However, it is not a guarantee of success because we have yet to evaluate her political performance and state management capacities, especially in the economy, society, and the justice system.
The National Syndicate of Tunisian Journalists has strongly denounced the repeated attacks committed by security forces against journalists on Wednesday. The union called on the new Prime Minister to put an end to impunity.
Appointing a woman as Prime Minister is a positive message, but she needs to end impunity and show her respect for the rights and freedoms, including the freedom of the press and the democratic values in Tunisia.
Tunisian opposition parties, national and civil society organizations have all called on Najla Bouden and President Kais Saied to speed up the formation of the new cabinet and to give priority to the country's economic and social crisis. The Tunisian General Labour Union has welcomed the designation of Najla Bouden. The UGTT has called for the formation of a government that will be made up of experts who will not be concerned with the upcoming elections. The union also stressed the need to determine the fate of the frozen parliament. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Former South African Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize has been implicated in a corruption scandal involving the awarding of a COVID-19 communication contract. Regarding the charges, President Cyril Ramaphosa has authorized the release of a special investigation report into the awarding by the Health Ministry of a contract for a COVID-19 media campaign. The investigation found that a multi-million rand contract awarded to firm Digital Vibes was irregular. It also found that senior officials had benefited from some of the money paid to that company. CGTN Julissa Jamila brings us the details.
The Special Investigating Unit's report into the dodgy Digital Vibes communications deal points the finger directly at former Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize. It finds that he acted unlawfully by meddling in the affairs of the administrative authority of the Health Department. The report also shows that family members of the former minister, his close associates, and senior officials in his department benefited from a multi-million rand irregular contract. Mkhize resigned in August amid the scandal, but denied any wrongdoing.
His resignation from government was, in my view, an act which was, you may not like this word, honorable on his part, when he realized that there was no other way in which we could go forward, and he then decided to resign. My acceptance of his resignation should tell you exactly the approach and the stance that I am determined to take on all these matters.
This scandal has angered the public. South Africans have taken to social media to vent their frustrations at the findings. Many are calling for the dismissal of the officials. They also want law enforcement agencies to act swiftly and deal with those implicated. Upon the release of the report, other senior officials were immediately suspended.
We fully understand the public concern and interest in this matter because it involves allegations of misappropriation of public funds in the middle of a major fight against a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has so far caused the country substantial spending of unbudgeted funds, as well as costing many, many lives and also livelihoods. Thus, we are committed to do further studies on these reports and findings, recommendations, so that we study them fully and so that we can act on the outcomes over and above just the formal disciplinary processes.
President Ramaphosa says the manner in which his administration dealt with the latest scandal shows the intent that his government is willing to deal with corruption decisively.
We've been repositioning public institutions. Even our SOE companies are being repositioned. They were a seedbed of corruption in the past, and that has now been turned around.
The report indicates that there is enough evidence to support criminal cases against some senior officials in the health department. Eunice Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Algeria has begun producing doses of Sinovac's COVID-19 vaccine. The country is expecting to produce 8 million doses a month. The production plant is based in the eastern city of Constantine. According to the Algerian Minister for the Pharmaceutical Industry, the country plans to export the vaccines. At home, the government plans to vaccinate 70% of the Algerian population by year-end. The country's prime minister was on site for the launch of the vaccine production process.
It is an honor and a pride to produce the first Algerian vaccine against COVID-19, which represents a big achievement.
The controls are exactly the same, whether it's on the imported Sinovac product or the products that will be put on the Algerian market, and which comes from the Seydol site. They are identical.
The debate surrounding intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines continues to rage on. Wamkele Mene, the head of the African Continental Free Trade Area, is the latest to join this debate. He's calling for a review of what he terms an outdated intellectual property rights system. Countries like South Africa and India have been pushing for intellectual property rights to be waived for COVID-19 vaccines. Mene went on to say that the current global system was stifling Africa's industrialization.
If we have an intellectual property rights regime that enables Africa to produce vaccines without being in violation of WTO law, that's what we have to do. It will enable us to respond to Africa's public health imperatives, because we will now be able to produce generic drugs. We will now be able to produce the vaccines that are required, not only for this pandemic, but for future pandemics. So this intellectual property rights regime, in my opinion, it's at the heart of the challenges that we're facing today.
As Kenya continues to battle COVID-19, a number of healthcare workers are now seeking opportunities abroad. They've warned that the COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating the brain drain in Kenya's health sector owing to challenges the crisis has brought. Some of the challenges healthcare workers face in Kenya due to the pandemic include long working hours without allowances and a lack of personal protective gear.
She studies by day, and by night she comforts and administers treatment. For almost 30 years, Eunice Ngari has worked as a nurse in Kenya's hospitals. Now she dreams of taking her skills abroad.
There are agencies which are coming to sort nurses here. And if I get an opportunity to work out of the country and I get good pay.
She wouldn't want to miss out on the opportunity. And Eunice is not alone. The Nursing Council of Kenya estimates that every year 600 nurses leave Kenya for countries like the United States, Canada and South Africa. They are part of the healthcare workers seeking new opportunities as the healthcare sector grapples with challenges at home. For Eunice, job dissatisfaction is a major contributor. A union official, she hasn't received a promotion in 10 years.
I find I may not be able to work until I am 60 in this country. What I'm working for cannot even make ends meet.
Many others can't find employment. On average, nurses' salaries in Kenya can range from as low as $230 to $1,400 for highly specialized nurses. During the pandemic, the medics have raised concerns about long working hours due to understaffing, lack of personal protective gear and equipment, and inadequate insurance covers that make it difficult for them to access quality health care when COVID-19 strikes.
You find in a place of work where you need this, you don't have. You need this, you don't have. You want gloves, you don't have. So you find all those things have got some stress, kind of.
Kenya's agreement with the United Kingdom will see tens of thousands of Kenyan healthcare workers emigrate to the United Kingdom to bolster that country's health systems. However, analysts say that Kenya has been losing healthcare professionals for years and that the COVID pandemic has only exacerbated the situation. Under the new deal, 20,000 nurses who are currently unemployed will migrate to the UK alongside other healthcare workers. The Ministry of Health estimates that Kenya has 60,000 nurses, 13,000 doctors, and more than 24,000 clinical officers.
For the people who don't have job, including those people who have jobs, including in the government, are applying for this job because they are not certified where they are, and they feel that if they go there, the pull factors are better placed. They are better for them than where they are, where the push factors are more.
The key to retaining the healthcare workers, the medics say, lies in improving their working conditions.
The bigger question is, do you have enough? Have you taken care of your caregivers? If not, why should you celebrate shifting or rather facilitating migration of your professionals to another country?
The government has pointed out that the UK deal is just one in a raft of measures meant to improve the prospects of medics, but workers continue to seek greener pastures. In order to secure positions abroad, healthcare professionals have to pass an entrance exam, so Eunice studies day and night and dreams of the new life that awaits her beyond Kenya's borders, if she can reach it. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more on Africa Live, but for now, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Zambia's headline inflation slows down to an 8-month low in September as food prices retreat from record levels. And Africa's leading carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, is set to bounce back to pre-pandemic traffic levels in 2023, ahead of her continental rivals.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start in Zambia. Annual inflation over there slowed down to an 8-month low in September. The decline comes as food prices drop from a near 2-decade record high. Zambia's currency, the kwacha's 2-month world-beating streak, also did help to curb import costs. Now, September's consumer prices were up 22.1% compared to a year earlier, according to Zambia's statistical agency. Year-on-year inflation declined marginally by about 0.2% to 24.4% in August, remaining 3 times higher than the top of the the central bank's target range between 6 to 8%. It was only slightly off the record high of 24.6% seen in July. The Bank of Zambia's Monetary Policy Committee left interest rates unchanged at 8.5% at the end of August, despite persistently high inflation. On to South Africa now. The new Cape Town stock market is set to open for business at the end of September. TWK Agri will be the first firm to trade on the Cape Town stock market. The bourse is expected to try and lure firms from across the continent with its listing costs, which are a third of that of the Johannesburg one. Other than the JSE, the Cape Town Stock Exchange will be the only bourse that's able to offer companies a mix of equity and debt trading. Now, the exchange managed to get its debt listing rules approved last year, and it's set to start trading in those instruments in October. While private equity has managed to find growth companies, South African exchanges have not really been able to bring them to market. Over in West Africa, the domestic wing of Nigeria's Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport in Abuja and Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos recorded a total of 3.6 million domestic air passenger travels in the first half of the year. According to the country's Statistics Bureau, that's about 67% of the total number of domestic passengers recorded in the period. The report also shows that arrivals during the review period stood at 2.65 million passengers. That's nearly 30% higher than the 2 million or so recorded in the second half of 2020, but it's lower than the traffic number for the first half of last year. Similarly, departures during the period for domestic passengers was 2.63 million, 28% higher compared to the 2.05 million recorded in the second half of 2020. Still on the business of aviation, Africa's largest carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, is set to recover at a much faster pace than her rivals on the continent. According to forecasts from the International Air Transport Association, IATA, the airline is expected to bounce back to pre-pandemic traffic levels in 2023, a whole year earlier than the rest of the continent. Here's CGTN's Girum Chana with the details.
Africa's largest and most profitable airline, Ethiopian Airlines, is living up to its name. According to reports from the industry representative, the airline is fast recovering from the hardship caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And compared with the rest of the continent's progress, ET is by far standing in a better position. And what makes this much more interesting is Ethiopian Airlines have achieved success without any government bailout. And its latest analysis, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, says passenger traffic to, from and within Ethiopia in June 2021 was only 30% below the comparable period for 2019. That also represented a 17% improvement between January 2021, which was 47% down on January 2019 and June 2021. Ethiopia's performance in June was well ahead of the negative 66.6% recorded for the African continent compared with 2019. So by and large, Ethiopia's air transport industry is recovering faster than the rest of the continent, and its progress is pegged on a more measured approach to COVID-19 travel restrictions. Passengers' demand now is expected to recover to pre-COVID levels by 2023. Air transport contributed $4.2 billion to Ethiopia's GDP in 2019, and its aviation sector, which directly employed 19,000 people and supported more than 1.3 million jobs across the wider economy. CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
South Africa's largest metropolitan areas are forging ahead with plans to secure their own electricity supply. The country's main power supplier, Eskom, has struggled to keep up with growing demand for more than a decade now. A green light from the central government gave municipalities a go-ahead to start acquiring electricity from independent sources, essentially anyone other than Eskom. As CGTN's Julie Shire now reports, the city of Cape Town is taking that a step further because it's planning to build its own renewable energy plants.
Most of South Africa's power is produced from coal. Cape Town is going the greener route by buying clean energy and building its own renewable energy plants.
We're looking at projects of the size between 5 and 20 megawatts in terms of that power range. And we'll be looking at those projects to be embedded directly on our network. And then in the course of the next 6 months, we'll be looking at initiatives to actually procure power from the open market, and that could be anywhere in the country.
Cape Town is one of 3 of the biggest municipalities trying to reduce dependence on the national power grid. The country has long depended on state-run Eskom, which has failed to provide a stable supply.
Eskom currently does not have sufficient capacity to meet not only the existing demand, but also the projected growth in demand, which is important for economic growth. So we think that it's time that municipalities also make a contribution in that space. It also means that local economic opportunities are created, which I think is critical towards the sustainability of cities and towns in this country.
This is a floating solar plant. It is very popular back in Europe. It's being piloted in South Africa and could prove to be a very useful tool for local farmers. The plant generates electricity to run the farm and saves water.
There's obviously very high demand for electricity in your pack houses and that sort of thing, where the arable land surrounds those areas. So we don't have space for ground mount solar. So everyone has an irrigation reservoir where you've got plenty of space to be able to use for floating solar.
The city, which is also a favorite among tourists, is working hard to cut carbon emissions.
We are moving towards net zero carbon status, and we see ourselves as a responsible corporate citizen. And I think to further that, we're looking at options such as renewable energy, along with other initiatives such as maximizing energy efficiency, particularly within the public space.
Meanwhile, to strengthen the power grid, South Africa is planning a new 2,500 megawatt nuclear plant. Cape Town has the continent's only nuclear site, which was built during the apartheid era and has served most of the city's needs for close to 30 years. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Let's head outside the continent now, onto China. Factory activity over there did contract in the month of September. Experts are citing high raw material prices and policies to limit the activity of high energy consumption enterprises as some of the main reasons why. The official Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, was at 49.6 in September. That's the first time it's dipped back into contraction territory in the last 18 months. But some sectors like equipment manufacturing and high-tech manufacturing, they tended to back the trend. They're still in expansion territory, giving us a reading well over 50. Experts say this will help with the high-quality development of the economy and also improve the energy cost structure. The non-manufacturing PMI reading stood at 53.2 in September, recovering by 5.7 percentage points compared to August. Catering, dining and tourism sectors all regained their momentum because the sporadic COVID outbreaks and rainstorms were less of a factor. Final update for you in this segment on power shortages in China. As part of efforts to ensure normal power supply, the National Coal Association has urged China's thermal coal suppliers to honor their long-term contracts. The association has sought 100% contract fulfillment in the last quarter of the year. That roughly translates to a fourth of all the thermal coal shipped by the suppliers in a year. The Ministry of Finance is also urging customs and tax officials to fast-track tax refund applications from energy companies. And that's going to be a bit of a theme as we get into global business at the top of the hour. We'll be heading to South Africa at that point in time. Envoys from some of the world's richest nations have met South African cabinet ministers to discuss a climate funding deal that could channel about $5 billion towards ending the country's dependence on coal. But Eskom has pitched a $10 billion bid to global lenders to advance efforts to shut down the majority of its coal-fired plants by 2050 and embrace clean energy. So how exactly is this supposed to work in Africa's largest emitter of greenhouse gases? We'll explore that live from Joburg at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
We'll see you then, Rama. Well, let's now take a short break and return your sport news, including Tanzania offers free football tickets to boost COVID-19 vaccination numbers.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is
the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Tanzania, in an attempt to get its citizens vaccinated, the country's government is offering free tickets to football fans to watch matches in exchange for being vaccinated. So far, less than 1% of Tanzania's 60 million people have been vaccinated for COVID-19. CGTN's Isaac Lucando has more.
As an incentive to get millions of football fans in Tanzania vaccinated against COVID-19, the country's Football Federation and the country's Ministry of Health are now offering free tickets to football matches. By offering free vaccination services along with free tickets at football matches, the government hopes to achieve its goal of vaccinating at least 60% of the population. Since the country's COVID-19 vaccination campaign began in late July this year, only around 350,000 doses have been administered out of the first batch of 1 million doses that arrived in the country. For the nation's biggest derby match pitting Simba and Yanga, two of the country's biggest clubs, free tickets were being offered to the first 100 spectators to get vaccinated. Despite a slight improvement in the number of people showing up to get vaccinated, COVID vaccine hesitancy is still prevalent across the country. Inadequate information on the COVID-19 pandemic, concerns about the safety of the vaccines, as well as religious and political beliefs have kept many from getting vaccinated. President Samia Suluhu Hassan believes education will be key in getting the public on board with the country's vaccination agenda. The Tanzanian Football Federation says the plan to incentivize football fans to get vaccinated is long-term. With millions of fans vaccinated, it hopes to get the World Football governing body FIFA to allow fans into stadiums to watch the international games hosted by the country. In a bid to bring vaccination services closer to its people, the government says it has set up over 1,500 COVID-19 vaccination centers across the country, with thousands more in the pipeline. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
New Kenya football team coach Engin Firat is looking forward to build a team that can get positive results after conducting his first training session with Harambee Stars on Thursday. The Turkish national, who was hired last Sunday, and his squad entered residential training in Nairobi ahead of their upcoming 2022 FIFA World Cup back-to-back qualifiers against Group E leaders Mali. All local-based players checked into camp on Thursday morning. Their foreign-based teammates were set to start checking in from this evening, apart from Abud Omar, Stanley Okumo, Eric Oma, Richard Odada, and Ishmael Gonzalez, who will link up with the squad in Morocco. Kenya takes on Mali in the neutral venue of Morocco on the 7th of October before they meet again in the return fixture 3 days later in Nairobi. Firat and defender Johnston Omura are aiming for a good showing against Mali.
Our first training session, I wanted to see what's going on the field, what the boys will do. In general, I'm satisfied. They do what they can. We will prepare now these days with the local players who are here. I will try to explain them what I expect from them. They have to adapt to me, the way we will play. And after this in Morocco, then the players who are outside will arrive. We will have only 1-2 training with them than to go on the match. Therefore, we will have not really time to be prepared for the match, but we will find solutions to go out and to play well.
The games we have played are behind us, but at least we have somewhere to start. The game ahead against Mali is now what is important to us. We should give our all to get maximum points so that we end up in a good position on the table. The team is okay and replacements have been done well. There is no difference or gap. The team is fine.
We move to Cairo, Egypt, where a South Sudanese professional footballer has established an academy with the hope of inspiring young African refugees through the sport. CGTN's Wanja Mugai brings us his story.
On a pitch in Cairo, football professional Francis Denkawal is honing the skill of a new generation of players. But these trainees are not Egyptian. They are young refugees from across Africa. Kawal, who moved to the Egyptian capital from South Sudan for his studies, believes life without football would be very harsh. That's why he founded the South Sudan Soccer Academy.
The academy aims to help families raise their children, teaching young people soccer skills, to protect them from negative behavior in the street, like homelessness and leaving their homes. We teach them in the academy to respect the old and the young, to respect fathers and the elderly in the streets. We also support women in soccer and women's rights, because women have the right to play soccer.
Established in 2019, the academy currently trains 180 refugee children aged 5 and above. Kawal aims to help the children who often live in difficult conditions to integrate into society and avoid negative behavior like street violence. At the same time, he's trying to instill a passion for football in young players like 13-year-old Bibo Abdel Galil from South Sudan.
I dream of playing in big clubs abroad like Real Madrid. And I really want to be like the ideal player, Toni Kroos. And I want to be the captain of the South Sudan national team.
The club is paid for by community contributions, mostly from the families of the trainee children. But Kawal says it faces many financial problems due to the cost of renting the pitch and paying for balls and uniforms. His hope is that the South Sudanese or Egyptian football unions can help him out. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
The Egyptian Opera House has celebrated the 150th anniversary of opera Aida. Stars from Egypt, Italy, and Bulgaria were part of the event. Opera Aida, which was created by the Italian musician Verdi, was the main attraction during the inauguration of the Suez Canal back in 1871. Since then, it has remained a globally acclaimed event. Adel Imruhi brings us the story.
In Cairo Opera House, an ancient Egyptian temple was built to prepare the audience for the journey through time they're about to experience. This is Opera Aida, a 150-year-old performance that has captured the hearts of people all over the world.
Every year, the performance is presented in a vision and a production which we don't usually change. This year we changed it a lot. It used to be held in the main hall, which is very well equipped. This time, however, to maintain distancing, the theatre underwent changes. So now we don't have the usual setup, and that made us innovate a bit.
We've made a 3D digital design so that we can display graphics on large LED screens on stage. This is a wonderful anniversary that highlights the history of opera art in Egypt. We're introducing innovations because of this anniversary. Our first show was in Roma, and this year in Cairo is the second this year.
Like everything in the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has also changed Opera Aida's annual rituals. The Cairo Opera House main hall has been its home for decades, yet holding it in an open-air setup has added to the audience experience.
I'm currently loving the show so much. The difference between this year's show and the previous year's show is significant because of COVID, of course. I've been hearing a lot about Opera Aida since I was born, but this is like my second time.
We are now up to the celebration of this great masterpiece of Verdi and of opera. And we, as Italian Cultural Institute, participated in the preparation of this presentation here. Tonight, also something that gives an atmosphere of festivity, it's the fact that it's open air presentations. Open air, you feel like, you know, it's summer, we are enjoying the nice weather, so it gives something different. But Aida is eternal, is a masterpiece that is been represented all over the world thousands and thousands of times.
Opera Aida is a story of love, sacrifice and betrayal. It took place after a war that saw the pharaohs of ancient Egypt victorious against the Abyssinians of ancient Ethiopia. The Abyssinian princess became a hostage of the Egyptians. It's then that a forbidden love story emerged between her and the Egyptian military general Radames.
احنا عايدة دي بالنسبة لنا احنا لأن دي الأوبرا الخاصة بتاعتنا اللي كتبت لنا مخصوص.
To us, Aida is a special opera. It was written specifically for us, so there are always special preparations for it. We work a lot on rehearsals and preparations on all levels, whether it's the artists, the orchestra, the choral or ballet. Directors work on every single and small detail to present it in the best way. And that's why the world knows that we perform it the best.
طاقم الإخراج بالكامل بيشتغلوا على تفاصيل العمل تفصيلة.
Egyptian 19th century ruler Khedive Ismail ordered the creation of an opera about ancient Egypt. He hired Italian legendary musician Giuseppe Verdi to write the music. A long time ago, Aida was to have been the inauguration performance at the Cairo Opera House. As its preparations failed to beat the deadline for the opening night, it ended up becoming part of the national celebrations of the digging of the Suez Canal in 1871. Since then, Opera Aida has been a performance widely celebrated across the world, which to date remains to be mainly an Egyptian-Italian collaboration. Aida al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. From me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the team, thank you so much for watching. Rama is up next with Global Business.